Okay, welcome to the Made of Clay show, which is a show that I curated here in the gallery at Lakeland Community College. My name is Mary Urbis. I'm the gallery director, and I'm going to be taking you on this journey today. I'm going to show you all the different kinds of clay art that these artists have created. And there's 39 artists that are international, national, regional, and local clay artists from Northeast and Central Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Texas, and the state of Washington. I hope you enjoy the tour, and at the end of this video we'll show you how to get a hold of me and contact me if you have any questions, and hopefully if you'd like to make a purchase. As we start the tour, this is the work of Jeffrey Allen. These are hand-built masks. And what's kind of interesting about when I installed these pieces is the shadows that were formed by how the way the lights hit it have kind of become like a gift. And when I create the show and when I design the visual storyline of the show, I try and create a story. There's a reason why one piece is next to each other, why a grouping is next to each other. Sometimes it's a visual thread, sometimes it's a literal visual thread. So, and what's interesting, like I said about Jeffrey's work, these are all hand-built and carved. And these are, and they have different names like Awaken, the Watchman, the Observer, the Sentinel. And then this grouping, this is an artist named Tom Radka, who lives outside of Canton. Probably out of this whole collection of artists in this show, I've known Tom the longest. I met him in the early 80s when we used to do outdoor arts festivals together. And his platter is one of those examples of how I consider clay artists work using the clay as a canvas, and how they apply the colorants and the underglazes and the stains and the glazes, how that impacts the surface. And you'll hear about how a glaze will fit the surface. You also have to appreciate when you're dealing with clay is that it goes through so many different processes. Unlike with a two-dimensional fine artist, someone working in fine craft can work hours and hours and hours on a piece. They put it in the kiln. If the kiln gods don't shine nicely on them, they pull it out, and it could be an absolute disaster. With a fine artist, they can go back and gesso over it and start over it. So I do honor the technique, the alchemy of these artists. They're using powders and water and heat, and look at these marvelous pieces that they come up with. This next piece is a tile piece also done by Tom Radka. And it's actually installed in two pieces and has a nice little French cleat so it hangs on the wall. And this is part of his Copper Red series. He also does smaller tiles, he does big tiles, installations, he does backsplashes, he does shower stalls, all kinds of things. Here's another piece of his in with a black and cream glaze. Next we have a nice ensemble work from Ikuko Maklowski, where she created the cubby holes. And what's cool about this is look at the great shadows that you're seeing in between the different cubbies and on the wall. And she does these little gems. Her work is usually kind of smaller in scale, but the glazes and the details that she incorporates into them make them pretty exquisite pieces. These next three tile pieces are created by Bill Briard. Bill just recently retired from being the chair of the ceramic department at the Cleveland Institute of Art. These are from his Icon series. And so he makes the tiles, he puts them on the wall. And again, he's another one who uses the French cleat method of putting them on the walls. So for those of you thinking of purchasing, you put the cleat screw the cleat into the wall, and then you put the other piece on top of it, and it fits nicely, and there you go. You don't have to worry about it taking down your wall. And what's interesting with these pieces are the different surfaces, the silver metallic against the terracotta. the silver metallic against the turquoise, and then you have this gold leaf with the terracotta clay. This next piece is a glass and mosaic piece created by Susan Gallagher, and she indulged me because I asked her if she could create a skull piece, because normally at this time of year, during odd years, I curate and install the skull and skeleton in art. So I had to have a couple skeletons in the show. It just wouldn't be a show in September without it. And Susan actually is opening a show this weekend, October 5th, in Waterloo at the Brick Design and Clay Studio in Waterloo. Okay, this next grouping was created by Judy Taville, who's from New Jersey. These are from her coral collection. What she does is she starts with stoneware and then puts porcelain slip over. It makes it really, really thick, so then she could carve away, pound away at it. These wall plates and these larger sphere vessels are pretty hefty. They're pretty heavy duty, but it's nice to see the white on white and just the beauty of not having the glaze, and how the shadows on the wall, or shadows from the lighting, creates a little bit more of a dramatic effect. And the vases, are glazed inside, so they are appropriate for, flowers if need be. Okay, next is a trio of pieces by Sandy Miller. These are Sagar-fired vessels, and the one in the middle on top was featured on the postcard and the poster. I just love these surfaces, how she burnishes the surfaces, puts the elements around it so that they transfer onto the pot. And then what she does, which is a little bit more unusual, is that she weaves these necks of her pieces. And so she leaves holes in the actual rim of the piece when she fires it, and then she puts those little those metal stays, which I think might be from fishing oars, or maybe they're stays. I'm not sure, but anyhow, so she'll create these beautiful necks to them, or like with this cover jar here, she'll create the lid and put some reeds on it, and it's always nice to see red dots. We love to, my favorite thing in the world is to call an artist and say, hey, we sold a piece of yours. So most of these pieces are available for purchase, and you can always contact me through the gallery, through the website, through my email, which we'll highlight at the end of the video. But again, these surfaces are what I call yummy, and it's that unusual pink color. Now this is one of those pieces. This is a painting by Kathy Mead Scarrett. She actually, was an artist who kind of worked in clay years ago, and I saw these pieces in her studio and how she put the layers on so thick it kind of cracked off like clay. And so probably this is the only piece in the show that most people are kind of like, what piece is most unlike the others? But I just thought it was an interesting way of dealing with the surface. Okay, this next grouping of 3 pieces is another grouping by Sandy Miller, but these are horsehair fired, which means she fires them until they're red hot, brings them out into the air, and actually places the horsehair onto the pieces. And what you're seeing is the carbon from the horsehair burning off and transferring onto the piece. And then again, she's got this one piece in the middle that we're looking at now, has a beautiful neck to it, and then I don't know if we can catch it on the video, but it's got the coolest shadow on the wall. And if you haven't figured it out, I'm all about the shadows too. It's the distance of the light, it's the fact that there's multiple lights, and to me it's one of the gifts. Same thing with this next piece where you get the fringe on the wall, and then you see a little fringe on the top of the pedestal. Okay, this next sculpture is actually done by one of my colleagues here at Lakeland named Paula Blackman, and it's driftwood and clay, and when the camera swings around and you see the rib cage and the clavicle, pretty much she found this piece of driftwood, and there's only maybe 1 or 2 pieces added to it. So again, it's one of those gifts, and I think someone called her and told her about a place on Lake Erie where you can find all kinds of driftwood. So there she went, and she picked up some cool stuff and scavenged what was, what had washed up on the shore. And Paula also, like I said, she teaches clay upstairs here at Lakeland Community College. And then we have a little gem of a piece on the wall. This is Judith Matson. And Judith is from Massachusetts. And then there's also, we're going to show you another small piece of hers too. The last piece were ceramic stones that she created, and this is a piece of ceramic with some clay also attached to it. And here's another piece of Paula's called Child. And most of these artists do have artist statements available, so if you are interested and wanted me to send you their statement, you can always let me know. If you visit the gallery, and those who know me know that I encourage you to come to the gallery and see the work for your own eyes, because sometimes you just don't get, it's just not captured well enough in a video. So I have a binder on the counter here in the gallery that has everybody's artist statement. This next grouping of 5 platters is created by Todd Leach. These are part of the series where he's been using a lot of text. Some of the text is obliterated, some of it is easy to read, some of it not so much. He does have an artist statement that does explain some of the background on some of these pieces, but some of the titles kind of speak for themselves. I'm Not Feeling Human, Nature of Our Reality, Conformity, Mind Just Collapsed, Uncharted Territory. So again, you get the feeling that there's a lot of thought process, a lot of soul searching going into these pieces as he creates them and as he titles them. Okay, this next wall has the work of 2 different artists. The 2 bigger wall platters were created by Andrea LeBlond. And then the piece in the middle is a tile piece created by Deborah Burris. Deborah and her husband Stephen, who were in the show, just recently retired and closed their gallery called Elements Gallery in downtown Peninsula. But again, it was one of those things that I had this lovely tile of hers, and the color picks up the pieces that were kind of included in Andrea's pieces. So this is one of those walls that just kind of happened and worked out well. Okay, this next trio of pieces is another grouping. You just saw the wall pieces of Judith Matson, who's from Massachusetts. These are also Sager fired. They're also, the surfaces are burnished. And oh my gosh, these surfaces that she creates are absolutely yummy. And again, you get the coloring by what is placed against the piece and what is transferred when the piece gets, gets fired, and then it comes out and then it gets smoked. And she calls them small eggshell bowls, and they've just got these beautiful surfaces. And again, they say pictures don't do it justice. I don't think pictures will do it justice. Come on in and check it out and see how beautiful some of these pieces are. Now this next grouping is done by a woman named, I hope I pronounce her name correctly, Deborah Oliva from Michigan. Now this first wall platter piece is kind of cool because if you see the shadow is so cool, and the way the light came through the plate stand, it's creating these little darts of white light that kind of echo the markings on the platter. That was totally a gift. That was not planned, and that's one of those serendipitous moments that me as a installation designer really kind of live for. It's kind of like, oh my God, look at how cool that is. And as we go to the right and pan her wall pieces, the same thing's happening where how the light is hitting those 6 pieces, it's creating shadows on the wall that are just exquisite to me. Then she's got 2 covered jars and then another wall piece. And her craftsmanship is impeccable. It's probably a 20 out of 10 scale. Right, the backs of the pieces, as she as a craftswoman, as a craftsperson, she thinks of all the different edges, the sides, the front, the back. You can't, you know, with clay pieces, you can maybe hide something on the bottom, but you can't hide the sides. And she thinks about everything. And these wall pieces, the way they have the hanging device on the back, you can move the orientation of the pieces and flip them without having to move the piece. It was pretty impressive when I unpacked her work. This next grouping is done by Betty Drake. Betty is a Cleveland Institute of Art graduate. I chose this grouping of the green with the yellow just because she does different glazes, but I like this because I thought it was a strong grouping. I like how she incisors the clay. It looks like maybe she uses a slab roller, runs it over corrugated cardboard to get those indentations. Which is again one of the reasons why it's grouped with some of these other pieces, and I'll show you why in a second. She created some bottles, the wall plaque, and again, even though it's a wall piece with the plate stand, look at that really cool shadow on the wall. There's a bowl of hers. Now these next three pieces, this is an artist named Tim Kowalczyk from Illinois. He's actually called a Trompe l'oeil sculptor. He makes these pieces, these are so incredible. He makes them look like they're made out of corrugated cardboard. And the one mug, the way he's got the shiny glaze on there, it looks like packing tape on the cardboard. And one of the reasons why I'm so endeared by his work is my very first job in a gallery at American Crafts was shipping and receiving. I'm the one who got to unpack all the art. It was like Christmas every day to see what the artist sent me. And then I was the one that shipped the work out back to the artist, or when our clients would purchase gifts and we'd send them all over the country. And I've shipped artwork to mainland, United States, Hawaii, and over to the Middle East also. Now this next grouping is done by the master lava glaze man himself, Michael Hamlin. Michael Hamlin is now living in North Carolina. I first met him in the 90s when I gave him an award at the Hathaway Brown Arts Festival when I was the prize judge. And I just love these lava glazes. And I actually have a piece of Michael's in my collection also. But I just love how they pool and crackle and just, and how these are just, the colorings with the blue and the soft purple, and it's just, I love his work. Okay, this next grouping is a grouping of urns created by Stephen Burris. Stephen is, again, just recently retired from owning a gallery in Peninsula, Ohio called Elements Gallery. And what he does is he creates these lidded urns. They all have little specific pedestals created for them. And he also has a side business of creating urns for funerary purposes, so that instead of spending the money on a funeral and a casket to be put in the ground, you could be cremated and your ashes could be kept in a beautiful little urn. And again, he's a master glazer. I've known him and his wife Deborah for decades. We used to do shows together, starting back in the 80s, and so he just does a beautiful job. Okay. To add a little bit of a humorous element, these pieces are done by Sharon Scheinbart. They're actually hooks for collars, for dog collars, or for jewelry. And again, I just wanted something fun, something a little different. And she'll also make custom ones for your dog if you want a specific dog color. Okay, these next four pieces are created by Michael High. And if you were paying attention a few minutes ago when I showed you Betty Drake's work and Tim Kowalczyk's work, they all use the same technique of incising the clay with cardboard to give you the textures and all that. So that's one of the reasons I put these together. These are all three of these pieces are hand-built. The fourth piece is a thrown piece, but then he adds hand-built elements to it. He does creatures, he does fantasy creatures, he does figures themselves. His work is also in another show that I curated at Artist Archives that's going on until November 10th. At the end of the video, I'll explain about the clay tour that I organized of 5 different venues, 3 curators that started at the middle of September and goes through the second week of November. And most of what he doesn't use a lot of shiny glazes. He uses stains and oxides for the colorants of his pieces. But again, these are some pieces where you really need to come see the work and see the details and see the impressed surfaces. Again, I don't know that capturing them on a flat pixelated surface does them justice. Okay, this next grouping is done by Irene Lawson from the state of Washington. And she's another one who indulged me and sent me one of her skull plates. It actually has decals of Frida Kahlo in it. But this is a great grouping of pieces with the green and red. I don't know, I'm a big fan of green and red. Forget about Christmas. It's about, it's about stuffed olives or green and red. But I just love the illustrative quality of her work and all the little details. You get the sense that she's got a brush that's probably a hair width, if that, and to decorate and put all the different embellishments on the surface. There's a skelly. I see skulls everywhere. This next grouping is an artist named Gary DeVoke, and this is his examples of his trademark black, red, yellow, and white ware. Actually, my very first 2-person show back in the early 80s at Pentagon Gallery in Cleveland Heights was with Gary. So Gary and I have been pals for decades. You do the math. And again, he did one of his lamps, which are really kind of fun. And so he'll do, functional plates and bowls and things like that. But for this show, I tried to choose some of the larger, more sculptural pieces. Okay, now this next grouping is an artist named Michael Kiefer. He's from Michigan. I used to carry Michael's work in my gallery, and he's one of the artists. He took forever before he would agree to work with me. He didn't want to deal with consignment, he didn't want to deal with paperwork. So back then I Xeroxed some money off, about, I don't know, $5,000, $10,000 worth of money, sent it to him with a note saying, what's it going to take? He calls me back a couple days later laughing. He's like, okay, what do you want? And we've been pals since then. So the thing is I also want to point out is, when I meet an artist and invite them into a show, curate them into a show, most of the time we become friends forever. And there's something about the clay. There's something, again, like I said earlier, about the alchemy. I had the privilege to take a clay class, a hand building class with Judith Solomon at the Institute of Art when I was a student, and that's what kind of nurtured my love of clay, taking the powder and the minerals and adding water and firing them and pulling them out of the clay and out of the kiln. And the first time I ever did a raku firing, oh my gosh, I was hooked. And so clay has always been a personal favorite of mine and one of my favorite medias to curate as an exhibition. And it's one of my favorite shows to do in addition to my skull show, which is every other year. Now these next pieces, these are created by Dick Lehman. And what's interesting about, and he's from Indiana, these are wood-fired pieces, but what he did is, what you're seeing a bowl that's been wood-fired, and what's hanging above it is a detailed shot of the glaze, because he felt that the glaze, that the glaze were so beautiful that they were pieces of art in themselves. And so when you purchase these pieces, you're purchasing a bowl and a detail photo. And the detail photos, I believe, were printed on aluminum, which seems to be a trend these days, which helps make the color just pop. And you could say these would be beautiful, would make beautiful abstract paintings. These next 3 pieces is an artist named Patrick Dougherty. Patrick's from Kentucky. And he's an artist we used to carry at Sylvia Ullman's American Crafts Gallery, and I hooked up with him on Facebook because someone shared a piece of his from years ago on his page that's called Studio Pottery Identification. He responded that was his work. I wrote him and said, hey Patrick, remember me? I'm doing a show, you want to give me some work? So here we go. So he drove his work in from Kentucky on a Sunday afternoon. And this large casserole piece, oh my gosh, I had to get someone from maintenance to help me move it to put it on the pedestal. This piece is a monster of a of a lidded casserole. He said, but a lot of times what people are doing is they make fun of him saying, oh, you make these big pieces, how functional they are, but then when there's a reception, everybody wants to use one of his big pieces to, for a reception to put some of the food in it. So I can't even imagine how heavy these would be if they're filled with something, but they're quite nice. And he's obviously into aviary and into the birds with the murder of the crows. This wall grouping is a grouping of clay tiles created by Deborah Burris. And some of them have glass in front of them, some of them do not. You'll see she does like to include a ginkgo. That's a recurring theme in her pieces. And all of her work are professionally framed. They're put under UV glass. Most of them have either handmade paper or silk fabric as a mat. And again, she's one of these artists who really thinks about everything. It's not only the tile and how it's presented, but it's also how it's framed and presented, and it's ready to hang. Okay, this is a series of wall groupings by Teresa Yondo. Do want to let you know that with the light, it does kind of wash out the details, but they're a lot more detailed and colorful than they might appear. Teresa likes, with the hearts and these pillow pieces, she likes to impress patterns and designs into them and glaze around them. This piece in the middle is actually called a meditation portal, which is a new grouping of work that she's been working on recently. And then here's a grouping of 5 of her wall hearts. This next grouping is a different grouping for Sandy Miller, where she's making these transfers that she's transferring onto her pieces. She's another artist who enjoys the ginkgo leaves and the bees. She's an avid gardener, and she's been canning up a storm recently, and she does a lot of functional work. And this is a nice little teapot set with a platter, cream and sugar, and then a waste bowl, which I would imagine would be for your tea bags. This next grouping is a beautiful grouping by C.J. Niehaus, and she's from Illinois. I first was turned on to her work on Facebook. I love the illustrative quality of her pieces, the fact that she has this large platter and the covered jar, with the turtles and the dragonflies, and then this other piece has to do with the bees and honeycombs, and she's got a piece with a little possum here. And she's got another one where she's got a froggy with some spools. I just love the illustrative quality. And what's nice and different about her work is that most of it has a matte finish, but then she does some of the highlights in a glossy glaze. So it's a nice contrast between the surfaces. Now we're going to see a bunch of pieces from Lynn Norwood Lofton. This is her Tranquility series with these deer figures, and she's depicted them as a baby, as a gazing downward, steadfast, looking up. And there's one called Adolescent. And these are so these are hand built, and then she adds thrown elements to them, and these are all, water, containers for flowers. They have little pedestals. And so it's kind of a nice grouping. In a perfect world, I would have loved to put flowers in here for the reception for the show, but I figured that might be problematic. But I just love the sculptural pieces and just the sense of calm, hence the name Tranquility. Now you're going to see a grouping of 5 of Sharon Scheinbart's turtles. Sharon, again, was another artist that we used to carry in my gallery in Chagrin Falls. I love the personality that she's able to capture with these little guys, the faces and the little dots in the nose for their nostrils, and she uses different things to create textures. She, creates organic design. She hand paints them. There's another one over here where the guy's kind of looking backwards, looking skyward. So I just love the personality that she's able to incorporate and imbibe into these pieces. And I'm lucky enough to have one of her smaller turtles in my personal collection. Okay, we're going to finish out this room by the work of Marcy Needitz, and she's from Indiana. I first met Marcy at the Cane Park Arts Festival. When you come in on the Lee Road side, she's been the first booth on the left for years, and I just love how she decorates her pieces and the color combinations and the tile pieces that she creates, and they have organic features to them, and sometimes she injects like stylized images of birds. Again, when I pick out the different artists for the show, I try to choose how they work with the surface, how they incorporate their design elements into it. Sometimes the glazes are glossy, sometimes they're matte, sometimes they're very figurative, sometimes they're very drippy, sometimes there's a lot of texture. So I'd like to think of these clay shows that I curate kind of like a survey of the media, and to let you, the viewers, who might be clay artists, who just might be clay enthusiasts, can see the different techniques, the different approaches, and how people can hand build and throw on the wheel, and these wonderful creations that come out of the kiln. And as I said earlier, most of these pieces are available for purchase. I'd love to see some more red dots. This is a glass and ceramic piece, mosaic piece by Mark Yazinchak. Recreates the tiles and the glass pieces and puts them together in a collage effect, hence the name Collage Effect. Then we have a grouping of pieces by Diana Vigel, and she's a CIA graduate. And what's interesting about Diana's work, these are assemblage pieces, assemblage, but especially the pieces in the center, those figures, she found those pieces of wood and then created the pieces around it. And it obviously was something that spoke to her, saying, oh, I know what I can do with these pieces. And come on, look at the bumps, they're perfectly placed. And the cool thing about, and crazy thing about Diana's work is when she creates the clay pieces, she has to have enough knowledge to know how large to make them, because they're going to shrink when they're fired, shrink when they're glaze fired, and she has to make sure that they're going to be big enough to go with the pieces, because if they're too big or too small, it's going to look strange. So her work is so impressive, and she, with these taller pieces in the cubby holes, they're wooden. I think she said these are wooden pieces from oh gosh, now I can't remember what she said, either from an organ or something like that. And then she puts like the converters on the top, the electrical transformers, and those look like little mini deer antlers on there. Okay, this wall and the display case features the work of 3 different artists. These wall pieces are carved and they're created by Susan Gallagher. And these are kind of a new grouping for her because for a while she was doing monochromatic work. Now she's adding color to the work. And in this top shelf of the display case, this is work done by Jack Rotar. Jack and I went to CIA together. And these are pieces from his Creatures from Another Planet, from Another World. And he does salt and pepper shakers, mugs, plates. Okay, on the next row, this is an artist named Bonnie Gordon, and these are some of her trademark, very colorful pieces of work. My very first two-person show was with Bonnie in the early 80s at what used to be called Bay Crafters, which is now called Bay Arts, over in Bay Village, right on the lake. And so some of these are some beautiful gourd pieces and tiles that are very organic, and how she incorporates the matte surfaces with the glazed surfaces. And then on the very bottom shelf is a carved bird piece by Susan Gallagher, who also did these wall platters that we just looked at. Okay, these next three pieces are some more wall tiles by Deborah Burris. And again, she's very observant of how she presents the pieces, how they're framed, how they're matted, mounted, and framed. So these aren't just tiles that are thrown into a frame. She really works with her framer to find mats and backing materials and frames that accentuate and really coordinate and work with the tiles themselves. And here's another piece where she incorporates her trademark ginkgo motif into the tiles. Okay, this next grouping of work was an artist named Sharon Grossman. She's another artist I've known for decades. I met her when she was doing woodworking in the early 80s. And this grouping of tiles you're looking at now where she's doing the different flowers. And the cool thing is she's got the texture on the background, and then on the back of the tile where she signs it, she made a little stamp of that same flower. And so she's got the chrysanthemum and the speckled lily and dandelion. And then this piece is a piece that Sharon just finished specifically for the show. This is a piece that it's ceramic pieces that are from dinnerware and some pieces that she had, and then also glazed pieces that she created. And this is kind of like it's called a kimono triptych. And the series next to it is the tiles. It's called Deconstructed Kimono. Sharon's been using the kimono motif in her work for the last year or so. And of course I thought it would be kind of cool to be put next to these platters of David Batz's with the calligraphic motifs incorporated into them. Now David passed away years ago. He was an instructor over at the Cleveland Institute of Art. I don't normally show work of our artists who are not living, but I just wanted to incorporate his work because some of the pieces, some of the artists in the show are teachers, and they teach at college level. They teach at community art centers, community education, and a lot of these artist teachers really did impact the work of so many artists that are working in our community today. This wall piece was created by Seth Nagelberg. Seth is the new chair of the ceramic department over at Institute of Art. Not even quite sure how he figures out how to do this piece, because when we swing around to the side, you'll see that what it does is it's creating the profile of Seth himself, and so how he hand builds the piece so that when you look at it from the front, it looks like one thing, but actually when you come to the side, you see the profile. And the cool thing is with the way the light is hitting it as we pan back out again on the wall, even that's not quite his profile, it is projecting a profile onto the wall. Okay, this next grouping of black and white pieces with bunnies is an artist named Ron Korzinski. Ron is from Pennsylvania. He's another artist. We actually used to carry his work at American Crafts, where I worked for 17 years. That was my first gallery job, so I've known him, again, for decades. And so this is a new series with him of wall platters and teapots with almost kind of like the Zentangle kind of design with the bunnies on the inside. And of course, it adds to the contrast that he does the bunnies in color. Now this next grouping of work is done by Terry Kern. She's from Cincinnati. Again, these images do not do justice to the work. She has a very highly illustrative style. She's another one that probably uses a one hair brush to do all the details. And this series that I chose has to do with birds and cages and memory keepers and moons, and there's just such an ethereal quality to her work that is just beautiful. And she did these 5 wall pieces that they're commercial pieces that she hand painted and fired. And at first she wasn't sure that she should enter these. I said, what's the difference in using a canvas? This is just a canvas made of clay. And again, here's 2 more pieces that are just exquisite. I'm a big fan of the moon, of anything organic, and there's just that there's a story behind these pieces. And again, it epitomizes using the clay as a canvas to tell her stories, to illustrate what she's thinking, what she holds dear. And then there's some sculptures that are here on the middle shelf. And again, these are just beautiful, intimate little captures where you just kind of stand in front of them and are taken in by the beauty and the quietness and the stories that they tell. And then the pieces in the middle on the black velvet, that's an artist named Susan Van Tubbergen from Illinois. And I just love these pieces because there's these little minis. I can't even imagine throwing something and making those teeny tiny little necks that she puts on there. And then she was nice enough to send me those little pieces of birch tree to give them little pedestals, because my thinking was like, how am I going to display these where they're not going to be totally lost? And of course I had to buy 3 of them as a belated birthday present to myself, but I digress. So again, you can just see how all the different artists treat the media. And back to Terry's pieces, where I don't know if you can tell, but on the inside of the cages, the one with the bird on top, all those little parts are individual pieces of ceramic that she glazed and put inside of the sculpture. And she actually had to come up from Cincinnati to install the piece, because can you imagine trying to ship these pieces and having them get here? So in the time that she would have spent packing them, she was able to drive up. And she's an artist that I've shown before, and we also carried her work in my gallery in Chagrin Falls, so I was glad to reconnect with her. And I know you won't be able to, I don't think you'll see it on the video, but even the cast shadows that these pieces cast onto the wall behind the case are kind of pretty and very delicate and ethereal. Okay, the last 2 pieces of this hallway were created by Mark Yazinchak. And again, this is one of those examples where you've got the swirls and the moons going on in Terry's pieces that segues to the spirals and the swirls created by the mosaic pieces that Mark creates, where he creates all the tiles, incisors the textures into them, fires them, and then grouts them onto the board, and also grouts the side edges onto them too. And sometimes he includes pieces of glass also. Okay, this next case is work done by Michael Calvin, who's from Texas. He's another artist I met through Facebook. He's got some teapots and covered jars and bowls, and again, it's an example of a very highly illustrative style. Some of the glazes are matte, some of them are shiny. Some of the pieces have multiple sides to them, but unfortunately we don't have like little Lazy Susan turntables so that you can see all around them. But again, it was just a different, it's a different illustrative style versus Terry Kearns versus, some of the Susan Gallagher's. It's just a little different way to approach using the clay as a canvas and using a three-dimensional form to put a two-dimensional visual on it. And again, what I think is kind of fun is the cast shadows that it creates on the wall behind it. So when I create these installations, I'm looking at all kinds of things, not the pieces themselves, but how they get lit, and then some of the, like I said, some of the cast shadows are GIFs, and they come out so cool. Okay, so this wraps up our tour. I'm just going to mention a few more things right now. We're going to kind of focus in on a postcard. I created an event called Clay 5, which is a clay tour of Northeast Ohio. And it included 5 venues and 3 curators, me being one of the curators. I actually curated 3 shows. I curated this show, Made of Clay, which is at Lakeland Community College. I curated Recast, which is a show at Artists Archives of the Western Reserve. And then I also curated a ceramic invitation that opens tomorrow night in the Waterloo Arts District at Article Gallery. So you can always look up Clay 5 in the on Facebook events. You could look up my show, Made of Clay. So hopefully you'll have time to check out some of these shows, see all the clay work that's available. My show is artists, like I said, from a bunch of states in Ohio. The Recast show is Ohio artists, and then the Article show is 9 Ohio artists and 1 artist from Pennsylvania. And so we end with a poster of the Made of Clay show, and the piece that's on the poster, it was created by Sandy Miller. And hopefully we're going to hone in on the information. You can contact me at 440-525-7029. You can email me. If you can't see this or you can't deal with it, you can always go to the Lakeland Community College website and just key in the words Art Gallery, and you'll get all my contact information. I'd be happy to help you with any information. I'd be happy to help you with a purchase, because like I said, my favorite call is to let an artist know we sold something. If you want to know a little bit about that technique or want me to send you an artist statement, I can also do that. So thank you for coming on our journey today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope I wasn't too wordy, but I think you can see I have a connection with all these artists, and there's so much information that I want to share. So thank you again, and the show continues through Friday, November 2nd, and we're in the gallery at Lakeland Community College, which is in Kirtland, Ohio, east of Cleveland. Thank you, and have a great day.